What hath God wrought? These were the first words sent over the telegraph that changed the world. The telegraph would become one of the greatest inventions ever to be made. It would allow for quick, long-distance communication. The telegraph was one of the most influential inventions of the 19th century due to the revolution, reaction, and reform that came with the newer, faster travel of information via the telegraph.
The first practical telegraph was the single-wire telegraph, invented by a man named Samuel F.B. Morse. Morse was born on April 27, 1791, in Charlestown, Massachusetts, to Jedediah Morse and Elizabeth Breeze. His parents sent him to Yale College, now known as Yale University, and he graduated in 1810. After graduation, he worked as a clerk for a Boston book publisher, but his main interest was painting. He painted many portraits, like Portrait of John Adams and Portrait of James Monroe. His love of painting persisted throughout his life, even while his interest in electricity expanded later on.
Samuel Morse's telegraph was not the first to be created, but he made the first practical telegraph. The original telegraph, made by George Louis Lesage, had more wires and was more complicated to make than Morse's. Despite these differences, they had the same general concepts. The telegraph sends electrical pulses that are either long or short through wires in quick succession, which can be heard and translated. This language is called Morse code. Previous telegraphs had no code. Morse has created the code to help make the telegraph practical. The signals being sent through the wires were why Samuel Morse's telegraph was the first practical one, because it was the first one to use only one wire, whereas all the telegraphs before it used many.
To understand the notability of this achievement, it is necessary to understand the significance of this advancement in technology. Some of the previous revolutionary technological advancements were the steam locomotive and the photographic camera. These advancements were very big, but soon there would be an advancement much bigger to take over. In autumn 1832, on a trip back from New York, while speaking to Dr. Charles T. Jackson, Morse had the first idea of the telegraph. He also writes a dot and dash system in his notebook at this time.
In 1838, Morse presented his design to Congress, and in 1844, the first words were sent over the telegraph. After this success, Morse started slowly expanding the telegraph lines using trial and error until he expanded them all around New York. At this time, companies began to see how influential the telegraph was becoming. These companies were soon opening their own telegraph systems in other parts of the country. Western Union, one of the bigger companies at the time, finished the first transcontinental telegraph in 1861.
Now, as the telegraph lines were longer and more accessible, it allowed for easier access to the use of the telegraph, which made transportation of information much easier. This made the telegraph one of the most important inventions ever because easier access to information is a stepping stone to technological advancement.
During the Civil War, the telegraph was used to quickly send and receive information from the battlefield. This was one of the most important uses of the telegraph to provide information quickly in times of war. Some other very important uses of the telegraph were staying in touch with loved ones and sending letters quickly as families spread around the country. Before this, it would take months to send letters cross-country on horseback. People's reaction to the telegraph was mixed. Many people were very excited at the thought of instant communication. They also thought that the telegraph could help with national rivalries and help form treaties and agreements. But some believed that it could make wars worse and more brutal.
As a reaction to how amazing the telegraph was, some people thought about how they could improve the telegraph. Taking past inventions and improving them is one of the greatest ways some of the greatest inventions were made. For example, wireless communication was created because we had wired communications, but inventors improved it by removing the wires and implementing radio signals. Another example is the lines used to transport information that laid the foundation for the first telecommunication lines to be built.
At the height of the telegraph expansion, a transatlantic telegraph line was built to connect Canada and Ireland, allowing for quick communication between the two countries.
As America became more connected and news was shared faster, information between the US and England still needed to travel by boat. But one man had a dream that would change this. Cyrus Westfield was a paper manufacturer in New York who had a dream to lay a telegraph cable across the Atlantic Ocean to connect North America to Europe. He started by creating a company called the Atlantic Telegraph Company. He then got investments from both the American and British governments and many other investors. In 1857, two different ships with massive amounts of cable left from Valentina Bay, Ireland. After only a few days, the cable snapped, and both ships had to go back. The next year, after staying in for the winter, two ships went out again. This time they would start in the middle of the Atlantic and combine their cable. Then they would go away from each other, going toward each continent again. Again, the cable broke shortly into the journey. The next month, they started back in the middle. This time, it worked, and the boats reached their destination successfully. It worked, but shortly after, the cable deteriorated and it became unusable. After the American Civil War, another, more sturdy cable was installed.
This new ability to communicate was in the public eye. For example, in this political cartoon, you can see two men shaking hands from across an ocean, signifying their connection by being able to communicate quickly and easily over the width of an ocean, which had been unheard of until now. This was one big step toward the connected world we have today, where talking to someone across the world is just a couple button presses away.
The telegraph was a revolutionary invention, but today, most people, if they were asked, might not list it in their top 10 of significant inventions. But think about what things would be like if it had not been invented. The world could be completely different. There may not have been phones, fax machines, email, or the internet. There may not have been many inventions we have today because we would not have the capabilities to make information widely available. This would have stunted the growth of the greatest minds now, because without the information of those of the past trying to move forward, every generation would be a running race, but restarting halfway every time.
In conclusion, the telegraph was and still is one of the most influential inventions ever made. If it had not been invented, we would not have many of the things we have today. It is important to remember the inventions that built the world. So think about the things of the past you may not use but could not live without their impact.